Most people have the very exciting goal that one day they'll go and buy a property. Some of us have even bought them. So I thought I'd let you know there's a maxim of law, every contract, buyer beware, and it basically expects that every purchaser should have done their homework or their due diligence before they sign a contract of sale. So much so, I showed you earlier today, they put the due diligence checklist on every single contract of sale now. So the onus is on the purchaser. Today I'm going to give you some property hacks or tips and tell you about some traps. So in order to be a property lawyer, I'm trying to turn the page. In order to be a property lawyer, you need to obviously have completed a law degree and done some other education. You need to be admitted to the Supreme Court and the High Court of Australia, and normally we're members of the Law Institute of Victoria. My first tip, whatever you do, get legal advice before you sign the contract. People go to auctions, they put their hands up, they haven't seen a lawyer. That's precisely what they're not doing. They're not getting legal advice before they sign that contract. Do it at auction, you're bound by it. There's no cooling off period. Even if you have a cooling off period as a purchaser, you will have paid a 10% deposit and you're going to lose part of it by cooling off. There's also very strict time limits that apply to purchases in contracts of sale. The vendors, unfortunately, are not subject to the same stringent time limits. It's a little bit unfair in that regard. So if in doubt, check it out. First, you've heard of location, location, location. Well, there's nothing like familiarising yourself with a location. And the advantages of doing that are, first of all, you can compare like with like. You can compare one property with another property and get a fair representation of what the actual value of the property is. But there are also some things you need to do. You need to look at Google Maps. You need to look and see where there are transport hubs. Look if there's a hospital. Find out if there are schools or childcare centres nearby. Look at your lifestyle. Is there somewhere for your elderly parents to move not far away into retirement villages or aged care facilities? Because they are all things that will affect your life. Disadvantages of some areas. Because I've been doing this for many years, I happen to know that there are parts of Toorak, for example, which have underground springs underneath them. I happen to know that Elwood has part of it built right on a canal. I also know that areas near the beach are termite affected or can be. These are very important. They affect the value of your property into the future. So they are the sort of things you need to do. Number two, you've heard of measuring the boundaries. How many people actually do it? Even if you pace it out with large steps, get a feel on how big it is. If a building is encroaching into your land and it's been there for more than 15 years, you might inherit the problem and it might have to stay there. So I'm going to tell you a little story, and this is a true story. Clients bought a beach house in Portsea. Their property encroached into the neighbour's property. In fact, their garage was built into the neighbour's property, and it had been that way for some time. I said to them, if it's been there for more than 15 years, we can claim your neighbour's land by adverse possession. We just have to prove X, Y, and Z. We waited the time, we got the survey, we did the stat decks and affidavits, and they ended up owning part of their neighbour's property for free. That is the advantage of an experienced property lawyer. Now, restrictions. When you look at a title search, do people notice that there are covenants? Recently, I had a very savvy commercial vet call me. She said, can you have a look at this contract? I'm so excited. I think I'll buy this as a veterinary practice. I had a look at the title. No, there was nothing on that that put me off. It was when I had a look at the planning scheme. Now, I'm not sure how many property lawyers look into the planning schemes and go check the regulations and the clauses, but I decided and determined to go ahead and have a good look, and I found out, she told me, I knew that often vets run catteries, and they make a lot of money on the side by having a boarding house cattery to mind people's cats. Well, this particular property had a restriction of no more than 2 cats on the site. I don't know how much money you can make with 2 cats in a cattery or boarding kennel, but there were also other restrictions. And I said to her, look, these are the restrictions that affect this property when you really get into it. You couldn't park there, you couldn't open certain hours, and you couldn't have more than 2 animals. I said, you know, look at your numbers, have a look, make sure it's the right property for you. And she turned around and said, well, actually, makes it totally unlawful and uncommercial for me to buy that property. So what might look good at first glance is not always the case. All right, anyone ever been to a property auction or to have a look at an open for inspection, and it's a beautiful renovation, magnificent. Sometimes there's even an extension. Have a look at that vendor statement. Suddenly you see that it says there's been no building permits issued in the last 10 years. All you need to do is ask Morris to have a look before you sign the contract. Again, horror stories. I can tell you about a client of mine. He came to me a year after he'd purchased a property. He said, I didn't realise that there was an upstairs extension that was an illegal building. I rang the council to ask them about it, and unfortunately he was then slapped with a show cause notice, and the council gave him a whole heap of requirements that they wanted him to meet, and then they issued the building order, and then they were going to prosecute him in the magistrate's court. Now, he didn't build this property. He didn't fail to get building permits. He just bought it. He said, how could this be? All I've done is pay for it. Well, it ended up costing him another $200,000 before he had come to me. And with my help, we sorted it out. There's a limit on what you can do retrospectively, but it was certainly a better alternative than what he'd been doing presently. The next tip I'll give you is building contracts. Now, as Melinda said, a lot of people are looking to build. Michael Shepherd looks at these every day. Building contracts, a lot of people putting their life, hard-earned savings into building. So my basic tip to people is, what is it that you really want when you enter into a building contract? And the answer is basically, you want someone to build you a lovely new home, a home that you can move into. So the main issue that is either the builder never finishes, they start, they lay the slab, they get a large chunk of the money up front, and you can't get them to come back and finish. Your windows are sitting in the rain, rotting for months on end. So you want to make sure that your penalty clauses and your damage clauses, if the builder is late in completing, are really expensive for the builder. So expensive that he doesn't delay. You also want to make sure that you can withhold funds at the end of the build so that he will remedy any building defects and make them good. So don't agree to just hold back 5%, negotiate. All right, the next thing that I can tell you is, when would you refer to a property lawyer? Well, normally there's an event surrounding referral to a property lawyer, but most people don't ring me because they want to say hello and they're having a great time. It's usually something where an event has happened. Either there's a child born, which is exciting, but they're growing out of their present accommodation. All the kids have left home and mum and dad are thrilled. They're going to be empty nesters and move to apartments. Or there might be a sale or a purchase of a property, or grandma and grandpa might need to move to a retirement village or a nursing home. Or there might be something with a death, and you might need some estate planning, such as wills or powers of attorney. Might be buying or selling a business. Property lawyers can help with that if they've had commercial experience like I have in my early days in the major law firms. Okay, retail or commercial leasing. Of course, quite a lot of my clients are commercial clients. They enter into retail or commercial leases. So now I'm going to tell you a little horror story. It sounds simple. I started with location. So I had a client, she was getting divorced, unfortunately. She said, I'm going to move. So I decided, and I've been out and I've bought a property out where my children are. I said, oh, that sounds like it could be, you know, an interesting thing to do. She said, well, I'm moving from leafy Camberwell and she's moving to Cranbourne, But unfortunately, it was a new housing estate in Cranbourne where people wanted to try out their new V8 vehicles doing donuts. So after 6 months, she decided that was a serious mistake. She actually said, I feel so unsafe living here, I've got to move back to something more familiar to me. So that little mistake cost her $45,000 in stamp duty and in all her other associated costs, merely because she had not familiarised herself with the area first and made sure it suited her. So too with moving mum and dad into retirement villages and nursing homes. It's a lifestyle decision. So the really most important thing about it is to make sure that they're very happy in the area and that they're with like-minded people who are used to living in the same type of manner that your parents want to live in when they want to retire. The next slide, my bread and butter referrals.
1 minute, Sally.
Thanks. My bread and butter referrals are conveyancing or moving to retirement villages, enduring powers of attorney and wills. My cream referrals are people who will refer to me more often, estate agents, property managers, owners, corporation managers. And my dream referrals are people who are constant and ongoing sources of work. So that would be people like financial planners, accountants, real estate agents, lawyers. I get a lot of lawyer clients, retirement and aged care owners and managers, and shopping centre owners. Thank you very much for listening.